Now for global business updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Dr. Vati. Good morning, Ayo, Rufai, all our viewers. Money Monday it is. We kick off with what to watch this week. The real focus is going to be Rachel Reeves and her spring statement on Wednesday. But today we get a lot of purchasing managers index figures: India, France, Germany, the EU, the US, the UK. Tuesday, I'm going to be looking for Tesla numbers. I saw a Tesla Cybertruck on Saturday in Lekki. Very, very interesting, although they are recalling those cars. But new vehicle registrations in Europe, Germany, France, the UK. It's a statistic that tells you how many particular brands are selling new cars, and so we'll see Chinese brands as well. US building permits and also new home sales on Tuesday. Again, Wednesday it's all about the UK. Rachel Reeves delivers her spring statement, a lot about the budget, taxes, shortfalls, and the like. We get CPI and PPI from the UK as well. Thursday, unemployment claims from the US, PPI numbers from South Africa. Friday, the UK again, UK business investment and retail sales, but a whole lot more going on this week as well. Oil and gas I think we're going to Asian stocks, I think. Yes, mixed bag. Shanghai Composite Index, Hang Seng, they're up. The Nikkei is down, Kospi down, Nifty in India is up, ASX is down. China is actually hosting global CEOs. I think Tim Cook, literally a few minutes ago, just announced a new renewable energy fund worth about 720 million yuan. So a number of global CEOs are there as China is trying to woo them over. Lots of oil and gas to discuss. Edging down a little bit this morning. 72.30, I think, for Brent crude. No, 72.03. I transposed the numbers. West Texas, North American grade 68.20. Also this week, we're going to be getting crude inventory numbers from the U.S. to tell us what kind of demand we're getting. So oil prices will react to that as well. Iraq has said it wants to boost oil production output to 6 million barrels per day. Iraq is a member of OPEC. They presently produce about 4 million barrels per day. They announced new drilling exploration with BP and a number of their oil fields. Iraq has stayed out of the news. No terrorism things, no issues with the U.S. I mean, they're building $117 billion corridor to avoid the Suez Canal. Iraq is doing its work. No drama coming from Iraq. Over to Nigeria. You've seen the front page of today's ThisDay Newspaper, Nigeria's newspaper of record. $21.5 billion in forward oil sales for the NNPC. ThisDay, of course, had this document that they looked at. Really great article. Encourage everybody to read it. And it talks again about how this encumbers the ability of NNPC to give crude oil to refineries, which is why I was so bothered by the news from Dangote Refinery last week that they're going to stop oil sales. I mean, these are things that when you're doing your due diligence and you want to invest in Nigeria and the downstream market or even upstream, these are the issues that are faced. If anyone wants to go on YouTube and check my deep dive into NNPC's 2023 financials, where I listed a number of these forward sales used for loans, essentially for a number of projects. As the Spanish like to say, eso es ese. It is what it is. I think we move on now to a bond auction that's taking place today. As you know, if you watched Arise News KPMG Budget Day, I had a sit-down interview with the economic planning budget minister, Bagudu. We talked about how Nigeria, of course, has a budget deficit of about 14 trillion. If that budget deficit has to be filled with borrowing, a chunk of it to come from the domestic market, a chunk of it to come from foreign. So we have a bond auction. These are two bonds that are being reopened. So they essentially, the coupon rates are already set. So it's about 300 billion Nigeria wants to raise. It's taking place today. I think the settlement is going to be on Wednesday. You've got the April 2029, 19.3%, the 2033 at 19.89. So decent rates there. Minimum subscription is 50 million. It's at the primary end. If you want to buy into these bonds, just talk to your dealer. They're going to be sell downs into the secondary market in order to get in on there as well. So some fixed income. And Nigerian bonds, by the way, on the Euro bond side, they have been doing well. Yields have been coming down because of the outlook for the country. So investors warming up there. We go from there to Heathrow Airport. We know about the fire that took place. They've resumed operations. But if you look at the flight cancellations, Friday 652, Saturday 31, Sunday 0. But there are some more investigations that have gone into how the substations, backup power, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of disruption there, but they are back on. And I guess we can just round off with some other tidbits. So Donald Trump is signaling that there's going to be some flexibility with the tariffs, which is just just causing more confusion. The UAE announced on LinkedIn that they want to invest $1.4 trillion in the US. And it's like there's a competition to massage Trump's ego. The UAE has a $500 billion economy. And this is $1.4 trillion over the next 10 years. Their sovereign wealth fund, I think it's just a smidgen under $1 trillion. One of the things that really made me shake my head was that they said part of the money is going to go into AI data centers, and they mentioned XAI, owned by Elon Musk. So of all the people that you want to invest in for AI data centers, you didn't go to NVIDIA, you didn't talk to OpenAI, you didn't talk to other folks in that field. It's XAI, which is nowhere close to where NVIDIA and other are when it comes to that. Turkey, the protests have continued this weekend. Mr. Imamoglu, who is, of course, Imamoglu, thank you, the mayor of Istanbul, said to be a big rival to Erdogan. The Turkish lira has tanked. The Turkish securities have tanked. The central bank has spent, now we're saying they're hearing it's about $12 billion. They've made some announcements this morning to limit short selling, to also allow share buybacks, basically to try to prop up the equity markets in Turkey. And then again, I call on Nollywood for transparency. Snow White, the live action film, movie money there, it bombed over the weekend in the US. It's made about $43 million domestic, about 44 or so overseas. So a total of 87 million, but the production cost was $250 million, which means that it is in the red. For comparison, The Little Mermaid, which came out around this time last year, was about the same price, about $250 million. It opened to 93 million, made 596 million, and was still considered a flop for Disney. So production costs, again, are the key to determine how profitable movies are. That's our update for today.
Because those markets have market projections. Let me go back to the NNPC and DACAs. Yeah, they have profit projections. So it's not just about making profit, but are you hitting the profit projection? Let me go back to Dangote and all of that story. So, a couple of things. We know NNPC has swaps of about $25 billion worth, and to the tune of over 200,000 barrels a day. This 450,000 barrels per day, I'll tell you a little bit about the history, was in the 90s, I mean the late 80s and the 90s. The idea about it was a convention for energy security locally. Yep. Why was it 450,000 barrels per day? Because that was the collective capacity of all the refineries we had there.
Yeah, that's right.
Today, things have changed. You have a 650,000 barrels per day capacity, but they're still saying, okay, that threshold is available. But NNPC cannot meet that threshold. The government had an initial 6 months deal that is off the table now. They said they're trying to renew. But we know the reason why that is dragging is also because NNPC have a lot of forward sales.
Exactly.
What's the solution? How quickly can we ramp up production? That's not going to be easy anytime soon. Because the deep wells, the deep offshore wells that are supposed to bring in the production, it will take time for you to be able to materialize on them. So let's say for about 2-3 years from now.
Yeah.
That's why we've hovered around 1.7, 1.8 million barrels per day. They promised by December we're going to ramp up to 2 million. Obviously, we've not gotten there. So what are you going to pick? Are you going to pick servicing your loans, which they will pick, over your national energy security? So what it means is that if Dangote now says, I want to collect dollar, you and I will suffer by buying heavier pump prices.
Right, because he has to import from elsewhere.
Yeah, because he has to import from elsewhere.
But the refinery is set up to do that.
So the refinery is set up to do that.
Yes.
But the argument before now was that as a local crude producing nation, we should be able to create buffers. But the recklessness hitherto of successive governments, including this, has also led to the problems.
Well, this government is new. It just came in.
But it was under this government they did Operation Gazelle that was also forward sale.
I'm with you.
That's it.
I'm with you.
All right. Just very quickly, before Dr. Vati comes in, I'll talk about the Heathrow Airport because it's said not to be just an incident, but a watershed moment in the aviation industry in England and the rest of the world. Obviously, we talked about how Heathrow Airport is one of the busiest airports in the world.
That's right.
And now, of course, the blame games have started, pointing fingers, but most importantly is the way forward and how this would change protocols around travel in the UK and perhaps even other parts of the world. The first part of it was the substation conversation around electricity supply. Even though in the past they had said that they had about 2 or 3 alternatives to the main substation, what that exposed last week was that they weren't reliable, even though they had them, but they weren't reliable in terms of and electricity diversion in the event of an accident like this, which happened. The other part of it is also exposing the under-investment in energy sector, and the Labour Party or the Labour government is under scrutiny. The Energy Minister has come out to say that they're going to launch a full investigation into this, but beyond that, he also gives further to the Conservatives to really come down on them to say that they didn't do what they were supposed to do in terms of being able to attract investment in that area. Also in terms of trust for passengers, I mean, it was chaotic.
It was really
People
chaotic.
described it as apocalyptic in many instances.
Yeah.
The people who miss business meetings, who miss personal, important events, funerals, weddings, and the likes, that trust might take a while. That trust and confidence in passengers in using Heathrow Airport might take a while and might be eroded.
Yeah.
But on the bright side, though, I saw an article of someone who had said he was going to the UK for business, and because he couldn't fly with British Airways, obviously they landed in Heathrow, he had to divert to using Airpeace.
Hey!
And so I thought,
All right.
okay, so when people, it's a win for us, and
Yeah.
and then he reviewed and said, oh, Airpeace isn't so bad, and I had to use them as an alternative, and I thought, oh, big win for Nigeria in that instance.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was the light in the tunnel for Nigeria as a business. So I just wanted to point that out.
A number of key issues. Let's start with oil. Last Friday, the U.S. decided to place additional sanctions on Iran. And, that gave the impression that there will be tighter supply. And so as of Friday, you had oil, crude oil, rising, going higher. But as of this morning, with the meeting, a U.S. delegation now is going to meet with the Russian team. They met with Ukraine officials yesterday. Yeah. Now, the fear is that with this discussion over the Black Sea, ceasefire in the Black Sea, maybe the U.S. is likely to increase, lift sanctions on Russian oil. And if Russia provides more oil, there will be greater supply. So that has affected oil prices as at this morning, with the Brent crude declining by 0.2% and WTI going down by 0.3%. But all of that will depend on what OPEC Plus does eventually in April with regard to supply. That's number one. Number two, as for what was that? U.S. You said President Trump was talking about flexibility. The flexibility that he spoke about yesterday is with condition. We must look at the context. He says, look, this does not mean that there will be more exceptions. In other words, we can only get clarity on that by April 2, when he says reciprocal actions will come forward. You spoke about Turkey. Well, the effect on the economy is what I think is relevant. The Turkish lira has gone down. Bonds and stocks have gone down because of the authoritarianism of President Erdogan. And finally, Snow White, the most divisive film of the year in the U.S. But he did well at the box office. Opening weekend, I think he grossed about $87.3 million. Right? It was made with over 200 budget to make more money. The rating of the critics put it at 44%. The audience reaction is 77%. There were controversies about the use of dwarves, about the use of Zegler, about pro-Palestine, pro-Israel, politics. But we just see how the critics may not always be right.
Real quick, I think we're getting feedback here. Operation Gazelle is not reckless and indeed saved Nigeria when it became apparent our external reserves have been compromised by swaps and were illiquid. So
what will happen
go ahead.
is that we will pay more.
We will.
For fuel.
We will.
So there's a contradiction, as I have argued, between, imports and what NNPC has done.
Right.
We will be the ones to pay the price. Forget about Operation Gazelle.
I'm just a response coming to what you said about being reckless.
We impact negatively on the average consumer. Let's give credit to Dangote. He has done what nobody has done since 1914.
Agreed. And he can import crude from elsewhere and refine it and sell in Nigeria.
That's it. Also remind
in dollars.
In dollars.
He will be selling in dollars.
Rotus,
it's
also remind them that I said borrowings of successive governments.
Correct.
When you now said, what about it, not this one?
Right.
That's when I not made mention of Operation Gazelle of this one. I said successive government.
But it wasn't reckless.
So they should strive to listen to me properly.
Yeah.
I said successive governments. I know there are always vituperations when we mention this government. Successive governments.
Successive.
When you now said this, you now said not this government.
Right.
And I said, what about Operation Gazelle? They should listen properly.
Hot news in the business sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Rotus.
Thank you.